Welcome back to Ben's Garage. I put out a little video before Motorbikes and Me, just going over the motorbikes I've had over the years. It got quite well received. A lot of you commented saying that, oh, it brought back memories and this, that and that, or, you know, never had motorbikes but it was interesting to watch. So I thought I would do another video along the same sort of thing with all the cars that I've had and stories associated with them. What was good, what was bad. So, when did I pass my test? I think it was 1994. I was 17. Yeah, anyway, passed my test. In fact, I'd already got a car before I passed my test. Now, my first car was my grandparents' car. Now, back in 1975, my nan won a car on Spot the Bull. Not many people can say that. She won the car, couldn't drive, but my granddad had a licence. So anyway, they had this little Mark II Escort. They used to poodle around in it. I think we might have, when we lived down in Kent, we might have put more miles on it than they did, because at the time my dad is a builder and he only had a works van, a Bedford CF. And when there was more kids, he used to put a sofa in the back. My sister was in the pram strapped to the side of the van, and that's how we used to go about. Anyway, going on a long distance holiday for us, up to Scotland, down to Devon, we borrowed my granddad's Mark II Escort. Anyway, fast forward quite a few years, and I think my nan had died, and my granddad was using the car very, very rarely, because he used to go around to the day centre and have a meal on that, and I think he was walking around there. So cheekily I said, you know, Grandad, what are you doing with your old car? Because I'm 16, I'll be 17 soon. And he said I could have it. Bloody marvellous. So we goes down to Kent, because we was living in Lincolnshire by this time. Dad drove the Escort back and I went with him, and I think Mum drove the other car back. Now, it was 20 years old. It was coming up to 20 years. No, it was 1975. This was 1993. I was 17 in 94, but I'd got the car before I was driving, so I could do it up a little bit. It had only done 27,000 miles in all those 20 years, but I think the spark plugs had only have been changed once. I don't think the oil had been changed very often. Third gear was as noisy as you like. Absolutely terrible. Once you got it into fourth, it was all right. So yeah, that was my very first car. Passed my test out on the road. Got my little stereo in it. It was a 1.3 L. All these pictures of the cars, pretty much up until later on in France, are pictures I've got off the internet, because I wasn't taking pictures of cars at the time. I wish I had done, but there are pictures floating about, but I can't find them. I've got a picture of the Escort sat on the drive, and all the other cars that I'm going to talk about, but so they're just pictures I've got off the internet just to show you what it looks like. Yeah, it was a 1.3L, it had the Kent Crossflow engine in it. Fantastic, really. The engine didn't last too long, and the gearbox. Luckily, my mate was well into grass track racing, and he said, oh, I've got a Mark II Escort, you can have it for 50 quid, but I want the back axle out of it. So I had the engine and the gearbox out of that, and he took the rest of the car away for breaking it up using on his little stock car, grass track racing. So that was that. I had that for a year, and then my 18th birthday, Mum and Dad said, it was getting a bit unreliable, the old Escort, to be honest. You know, 17-year-old don't look after things very well, do they? So Mum and Dad said, well, how'd you fancy a new car for your 18th birthday? Oh, bloody hell. And I said, well, I've seen one up the road at the garage, up the road from where I used to work. So we went in there and I looked at it, and it had a nice new paint job. That was hiding a few little scary things, but anyway, so they bought it for me. Nice little MG Metro. So it was a bit of a step up for the old Mark II Escort in terms of power and things like, I don't really know how much power these were making at the time, but MG Metro had the 1275 engine in it, hydroelastic suspension, which I tested out to good effect. It collapsed a couple of times on the back, but a fantastic little car. And you know, but the new paint job, we just didn't look over it properly. It had been in a smash, and I think they just put new panels on it, but underneath the subframe, the front subframe wasn't attached to the car properly. The engine went in it quite soon. I think I'd had it a couple of weeks and the engine went, it blew a hole in one of the pistons. I still had the Escort, so luckily I managed to sell the Escort to pay for another engine for the Metro. So puts another engine in it and did quite a bit of work. New radius arm pins and stuff, because they were quite notorious on the old Metros. Did all that. And then we get to my 19th birthday, by which time my brother was 17 and he was going through his lessons and that. So I sold the MG Metro to him and I bought this, an Eagle Jeep. We had this in at work. We'd had it in a couple of years previously. A bloke traded it in for something, and then we did a little bit of work on it and then sold it to another customer. She had it for a couple of years and then traded that back in. And it was just sitting there, and I said to the boss, you know, how much do you want for it? He said, oh, you look like you're interested in it. I says, yeah. I says, how much do you want for it? And he said, well, we'll let you have it for £600 with a full MOT on it and everything. It was a little bit tatty, but it was awesome. It was based on a Cortina, so all the running gear was Cortina. It was a 2-litre Ford Pinto engine, 4-speed gearbox. It had a 4-branch exhaust manifold straight into a Pico back box. If you remember the old Pico silencers, that used to stick out by the driver's side. It was loud, and because it was fiberglass body, it was as light as anything, and it used to really fly. A couple of little quirks on it, which we did rectify. I was out messing around with the lads in it, give it a big old bootful coming out of a junction, and there was an almighty bang, and it lurched to one side sort of, and then all these sparks were flying out from underneath. It's like, oh, what's going on? Because it didn't have doors. It did have doors and a roof, but I used to take them off. I did put them back on in the winter. Anyway, gets out of it, and where the axle on the Cortina, it's like trailing arms go forward. The bolts in the chassis, how it ever passed a mechanical examination, I do not know. The bolts just sheared, and of course the trailing arm dropped down, axle moved, prop shaft on the floor, and that's where all the sparks are coming from. But yeah, fantastic. Dad helped me do the new dashboard, because it just, all they did with the Cortina, they took the clock cluster out of Cortina and just stuck it in the middle of the dashboard and put like this quilted padded stuff, and it just looked pants. So I did have a picture of it somewhere, but I don't know where it is. We took all the clocks out of the Cortina speedo unit, and we separated them, put them in rings with glass and on it and everything, and had all the gauges, and they were all across the dashboard, and it was nice. It was really quite a good job. More because Dad helped me, but but yeah, that was fantastic. Had a tow bar, so I used to tow the old trailer about a bit, and bits and pieces. Went away on holiday in it. It wasn't so good on fuel. You get about 25 miles to the gallon, but it used to go like stink. Sometimes I used to forget to clip the bonnet back up. It had just rubber things that held the bonnet down. You get driving along and it wouldn't come up, and then you get to a certain speed and it would start coming up slowly and get to about there, and then just go bang against the windscreen, and it was like dark. So you'd have to stick your head round the side to bring the car to a stop, put the bonnet down and latch it back on. I did that a couple of times, but yeah, that was a good bit of kit. Good fun. Anyway, while I had that, I'd bought the motorbike, my first brand new motorbike, and by this time my brother had sold the MG Metro and he was buying a brand new car. So I had the Jeep sat on the drive up for sale. Now, this particular night or day, Mum said to me, can you move your Jeep into the garden so that your brother can park his new car on the drive? I said, yeah, I'll do it tomorrow. Anyway, that night it got stolen, didn't it? bloody marvellous. And because it wasn't insured, it was, you know, it's on private property, and no insurance, no nothing, so it was gone. It was quite unique, but at the time you didn't have eBay, you didn't have all the stuff on the internet where you could put out "anyone's seen my Jeep" sort of thing. So that was down to experience. After that, I had a company car. I kept asking for a pay rise. I said, "We can't give you a pay rise. We'll give you a company car." So I was running around in a Morris Minor pickup. It had all the works livery up the side of it. It was a trophy winner. It was a really good condition. I haven't got a picture of it, but thinking about it now, it was a rolling advert for him, wasn't it? So it was a win-win situation. I mean, I didn't have to tax or insure it. I just had to put petrol in it. Anyway, I had a run of company cars and that, and I'll buy myself a nice car. So I bought a Sierra XR4i, 2-wheel drive, rear drive, 5-speed gearbox, and it had the 2.8 Cologne V6 engine in it, which made a whopping 150 horsepower. But it was awesome, you know. It sounded nice. It went quite well. I had that for a while, and I must have just got bored with it, because I put it up for sale, sold it, and then the boss had a customer's car that had been traded in because it was broken. It was a Rover 827, so I bought that. The 827 had the Honda engine in it. The Honda Legend with the same engine. When you bought the Honda Legend, they said, "Don't ever tow with this car. It's not designed for towing," blah, blah, blah. You bought the Rover with the same engine and gearbox. You open the handbook and it shows you how to tow a caravan. Towing with them just doesn't do the gearboxes any good whatsoever. And this particular one, it had done something in the gearbox and it had thrown something out. Big chunk of casting had come off. It was still sat in the engine bay. We stuck it back on, filled it back up with oil, and it was driving around, but the gearbox was playing up. It would set off in second gear, change into third, and once it changed into fourth, it would jump back into second again. Not a lot of fun. It did go. It went like stink. I don't know how many horsepower it was, but the 2.7 V6 Honda engine in it, right, used to go second. First gear, it never worked. Even if you held it down in first, it used to set off in second, change into third, and at about 110 miles an hour, it would change into fourth and then jump back into second. Of course, it would pull you out of your seat because it was like slamming the brakes on. Anyway, at the time I was playing in a band with my dad, and I thought, oh, I'll get a bandwagon. So we had an old Mark II Transit, twin wheelbase, breakdown truck with a crew cab on it. And so I said to the boss, well, I said, do you want to do a swap with the Rover for that Transit? So I ended up with this bright orange with stripes down the side, Transit van with a crew cab. It was a proper van, but the van had been cut off at the back and they'd put a crane on the back. Well, the boss wanted all the crane stuff, and the van was just, so what I was going to do was just build a box on the back of it. So we got the crew cab, all the music gear in the back, and away we go. But I decided I was going to move to Cambridge, where all my mates had moved to. So I put it up for sale in the paper, because that's what you did in those days. You put an advert in the paper. The day I moved to Cambridge was the day that two blokes come to pick it up. I think I sold it for 40 quid. They actually got pulled up by the police driving it back to their house with no driving documents or anything. So I don't know how that panned out. Anyway, now living in Cambridge, I've got my motorbike, the ZX7R at the time, so I was backwards and forwards to work on that, but the weather was getting crap. Lad at work had a Escort XR3i. His missus was just due to have a baby, so he said, oh, I've got to sell it. So I give him £140 for it. So it was a E-Reg, 1988, XR3i. It was the same as this one in the picture. A little bit smoky. Valve stem seals on the old CVH engines normally. Anyway, phones the insurance company and says, you know, I want to insure this XR3i. I think I was 22 at the time. They said, oh, it was like £1,200, third party only, and I nearly fell off my chair. I was like, how much? So I'd already bought the car. So what I did, they'd only got one car, and there was a lot of them in the house at the time, and Mum was going off to work and Dad was going off to work. So I said to my dad, do you want this car? So he said, yeah, we'll have it. They insured it because obviously they were quite a bit older and had no claims and all that sort of thing. So Dad had that Escort. I actually borrowed a tool off my old garage that I used to work for to change the valve stem seals. We did all that and it stopped smoking a little bit. He had it for quite a while because I remember he took it back for an MOT and it failed on some welding, and I went back over there for the weekend, welded it up. But anyway, that was where the XR3i went, and I think they later on sold it. So I'm back in Cambridge. I used to walk to work when it was really bad weather because I'd stripped the motorbike down, and the shop round the corner, he had a Jaguar sat there for sale, and I kept looking at it. I thought that looks really nice, and it was up for £1,500. It was a 1988 XJ40 Sovereign, so sort of like the top. It wasn't just an XJ6, it was the one with all the extras. It wasn't quite the Daimler version, but it was pucker. It was a pet shop. I went in there and he had it up for £1,500, and I asked him about it, and he was only the second owner, and he just spent over £1,000 on it because the old Jags had metric wheels, so he'd put 5 brand new tyres on it. Metric tyres were quite expensive then. It's fully serviced. Now he bought the newer shape, which was the X300, and the alarm side packed up. Of course, Jaguar was at Marshall's in Cambridge. He took it there. They wanted £1,500 to fix his new car. So that's why he was selling the old one. So yeah, I bought that. Phoned up the insurance company, waiting for another fall off my chair moment. 22-year-old Jaguar XJ40 Sovereign, 3.6 litre, straight 6. Yes, sir. £600 fully comp. I was like, you what? I says, how can you insure a car like this, which will do nearly 150 mile an hour, for that £600 fully comp, and you won't even touch me with an XR3i? He said, well, sir, he said, the Jaguar is a bit of a granddad's car. I don't care what you call it. That'll do for me. So I had the old Jag. It was beautiful. Smooth, powerful. It drove like it was new. It had been looked after. It had done 130,000 miles. But the inside was immaculate. There wasn't you drive down the road, there wasn't a rattle or anything on it. It was lovely. Mum drove it, Dad drove it, a few people drove it and said how well they liked it. We used to drive around when I had the lads in it. People used to think we were the mafia driving about, or gangsters. Yeah. Anyway, go back to Mum and Dad's for the weekend. I used to work on the Dairy Crest, delivering milk, driving a lorry. Go back for the weekend, go over a humpback bridge, and this van come over in the middle of the road, took off and landed on top of the Jaguar. So I had to chase him up. He got out and ran off. So I chased up the road and grabbed hold of him. And it was bush tyres. Don't know if you're in and around Lincolnshire. He was a tyre fitter. I think he was still pissed up from the night before. I should have called the police really, but I thought, well, he's going to be insured. It's bush tyres. He'd just been out on a job, but you could smell drink on him. Anyway, I phoned my old boss up. He come and took the car away. So I got a lift back to Cambridge. It was going on and on and on, that insurance thing, because my insurance company was in touch with Bush Tyres head office, and the messages weren't getting from the depot to the head office, and it was going on and on and on. So I got hold of my insurance company, found out who they were insured with, got in touch with their insurance company, and they said, look, if we'll send them another letter. If they don't reply to this letter, we'll put them down as being at fault and we'll pay out on the car. All right, okay. So they did all that, and they said, right, we're going to send an assessor out to the garage. Of course, he had his fees. I'd already spoken to my old boss, and he says, whatever you do, don't accept the first offer. So he phones me up, the assessor. We'll give you £1,800 for it. And I thought, oh, that's more than I paid for it. And I says, no, that's not enough. So anyway, off he goes. Comes back. He says, we can give you up to 3,000. I says, well, that'll do. 3,000's fine. I thought, well, I only paid £1,200 for the car. And he says, and you can keep the car. Right, bloody hell, marvellous. But I had nowhere to put it. No, I didn't have any way of fixing it. It had pushed all the suspension in, knackered all the wing up, smashed headlight work. So I went round to the boss with the logbook, and I said, my old boss, I said, look, you've been paid out for all your recovery fees and storage. They've just given the car to me, so here's the logbook, do what you want with it. I don't know what he did with it. But while I was on the phone to their insurance company, she said to me, do you want to go for loss of use? And I'm like, what do you mean? She says, well, because you've been without your car, you can claim £10 a day. I'm like, oh, it was 198 days. That was another cheque for nearly £2,000, so bloody marvellous. That's about the only result I've ever had with insurance anyway. So we'll skip a bit further. I moved back home, and then I moved to Peterborough. No, I moved back home, that's right. Bought the BMW. Never been a big fan of BMWs, but it was cheap. It was £150. It had been in the same family since brand new. It had all the receipts from brand new, and it had all the receipts from when it was bought with all the options, and it had been de-chromed. It had the sports gearbox, all these options, and it was about £17,000, which for a 1988 car is quite a lot of money, I think. So I had that for a bit, but it was a bit wallowy. Used to get through the petrol. Although it was a 525, the actual engine was a 2.7. I'm not sure what their thinking was with that, because you had the 525 and then the 528 and then the 535. All 6-cylinder. Even the 520 was a 6-cylinder, but the 518 was a 4-cylinder. So this was the 525 with the 2.7. If you got 20 miles to the gallon out of it, you were doing well. It was pretty crap on juice, and it was really wallowy, like a barge. You used to go around corners and it would lean about. So I fit a set of lowering springs. I lowered it 40mm, and it was a different car. It really was. And that car was the most controllable I've ever had, where you could drift it. Once the arse end kicked out, you could just... that's why a lot of them use BMWs for drifting, I think, because they're so controllable. When I had the Jag, if the back end started going on the Jag, before you realised it had done it, it was nearly too late, and it was almost whipped round on you. But the BMW, it was easy. Just steer into it. Piece of cake. So that was the BMW. And then I needed something else. It wasn't unreliable, but it was quite thirsty. And my then wife at the time said, her dad had a little engine reconditioning business. He said he's got a little Escort van if you're interested. And we got it dirt cheap. So I ended up with a little Mark V Escort van, diesel. Brilliant. Fill it up once a month, if that. It just sipped on the diesel. You get shitloads of stuff in the back. It was really handy. So we sold the BMW for £600, I think we got for that. Got this Escort van. Then he said, got this Rover, if you want it, cheap. So I'll give him £100 for this Rover. It's a 216 GTI. I still had the Escort van, I'm running around in that. And so I got this Rover, 216 GTI. It wanted some new panels on it, so we've got all the new panels from the scrapyard, rubbed them all down, painted it up, got it really nice, put it up for sale, sold it pretty much straight away, and I think that weekend the lad that bought it crashed it, because they were quite nippy cars, the old 216 GTI. So that was a fleeting car that we had. And then she said, there's a garage up the road. She said, I know you love your Jags, they've got an XJS. And it's going like cheap. Somebody had rolled back into it in the traffic and just bent the bonnet hinge. I went around and had a look. I thought, that's nice, because I've always liked XJSs, and it was the V12 HE, so it was the the 300 horsepower version. When the XJS first came out, it was only 280 horsepower, and then it was the HE, which I think it was supposed to be high economy, but when you've got 12 cylinders, there's no such thing. But it was alright, 3-speed gearbox in it. I parked it up at Mum and Dad's house for a bit, and while we was buying another house. So I said, right, we'll go and get the Jag and we'll get it over on our new house, on the driveway on a new house, and I can start work on it. I remember I went up into town and got £5 worth of petrol in a can, put that in the Jag, drove it into town, put £45 worth of petrol in the tank, set off back for Peterborough, which was about 40 something miles, and the fuel light was back on time we got back to Peterborough. It was terrible. The viscous fan had seized up on the viscous clutch on the cooling fan. That's right, had seized up, and the fan didn't freewheel. So as you was accelerating, all you could hear was this roar of this massive fan. It sounded like a bloody aeroplane going up the road. And I think that's why it was drinking a lot of petrol, because it was having to drive that big fan, and it wouldn't freewheel because it had seized up. But yeah, I never did get round to doing it. So I've just got to look on here. So I'd forgotten about the Rover and the XJS. But anyway, I think I let the XJS go for scrap. Then I've got a Land Rover 110 A-Reg 1985. Is it A-Reg? No, 83. 83. Yeah, 1983 A-Reg. Got it from where I was working. It sat on the drive, and I just never got time to do anything with it. It would have been a nice truck. It had the old looked like the Peugeot engine that they put in the Sherpas and all that kind of thing. I think it was a 2.5 diesel, but it was naturally aspirated. You know, it wouldn't pull itself out of a puddle, really. It would, because of the gearing, but it sat there, and then I was out and about, and this is when I bought my first Range Rover, which was all up and running, almost. So I said to I hadn't paid the boss for the 110. I was working for a recovery firm, and it was sat there, and he says, yeah, just get it out of the way and then pay me when you can. And I hadn't paid him for it, and I said, look, can you have it back? I says, because I haven't got the time to fix it up. I'm going to buy this Range Rover. So he says, yeah, because he knew he knew plenty of people that wanted to buy it. So I bought this Range Rover. K-Reg 1993. It's a 3.9 V8. It was a bit tatty, but it drove most of the time. I had some big issues with it. I was coming out to France in it, and I took it into a Land Rover specialist, and he said, oh, it's your ECU. So I ordered one of them. It's your mass flow air sensor. And every time he was only around the corner from where I worked, and every time I pop in, oh, it's this and it's that. So I put quite a bit of money into it. Took it to another place. They said they'll do a sniffer test to make sure see if the head gaskets are gone, which is common on those. No, the head gaskets are fine. I don't think they actually looked at it, to be honest. Anyway, if you got going and you got it up to 60 miles an hour and just touched the throttle, it would be fine. But if you accelerated, it was banging and jumping about, and so we was going out to France, and it was bringing my mum back out, and I had my brother and the trailer with all the motorbikes on the back. I said, well, once we get into France, if I can get it into France and it breakdown will take us to where we're going. So filled it up with petrol in Peterborough. Did 175 miles, had to fill it up again in Dover. Had to keep topping the water up. I don't know where the water was going. Anyway, we was running around in it, and I kept thinking, right, there's something that's not right here. So I'll take the thermostat out. So I took the thermostat out. Anyway, Dad went out in his car with the old radios, and luckily he did, because he ran out of diesel. And he called us up on the things and says, can you come out with a can of diesel? So, and as I pulled up behind where he'd broken down, I could smell antifreeze, and I opened the bonnet, and the antifreeze was squirting up the back of the thermostat housing. I thought, it's pressurising. So I thought, well, it's got to be head gasket or something like that. So what we did, we drove it back to Dad's place. He found a plumbing fitting which fitted on top of the expansion tank, and we got some like little plexi plastic, and he had a hole cutter and cut the hole out, cut this disc out with a hole in the middle. That went inside the plumbing fitting, tightened it up, and it was like that for 2 years. It did finally give up, but yeah, so it was pressurising somewhere, but with the little hole in the top, the pressure just used to come out the top, and it never overheated, and it was almost 2 years it was like that. I did have that parked up. I bought Dad a Range Rover because he had a Vauxhall Frontera. It was falling apart, but the engine was good. It had the 2.8 Isuzu, which was a really good donor engine to put in the Range Rover. So I said, right, I bought you this car. I'm going to drive it out to France and bring back your Frontera, take the engine out of it, and that's going in my Range Rover. So we did that. So I've got the Range Rover and the Frontera sat on the drive. Then I had a motorbike accident, and it was like, I just ain't got time, and I can't do anything with this. So I sold a hell of a lot of parts off the Frontera because people were screaming out for them, and I just let them both go for scrap. Then I bought this, the Range Rover 200 TDI. This is the one that I came out to France in. Fantastic car. Yeah, did the job. So the 200 TDI. This is the one that I came out to France in. Had no first gear, so you had to set off in second, which with that engine it was no problem. Got 5 gears. Fantastic engine. I'd had the engine out, done the cam belt, water pump, new clutch, all that sort of stuff. Lifted it up, heavy duty bumper on it, all that kind of stuff. I did buy a spare gearbox before I moved out to France and brought it out with me, but I never got around to changing it. Now when I was towing the Sankey trailer, it was quite heavy, so what I had to do was put it in second gear in low. Because on the Range Rover, you've only got low and high. You've not got diff lock on the centre, because the diff lock on the Range Rover on that one is a viscous coupling, so that when it senses that you're losing grip on one axle, it tightens up and then equally distributes the power. So you'd put it in low, second gear, get the thing rolling, put it into neutral, and you'd have to be into high. It's not the ideal way of doing it because you're supposed to be stopped. But if you were sort of just rolling enough, you could, as long as you put the gearbox into neutral, low to high, back into second, and away you go. Bit of a rigmarole, but say I did have a spare gearbox, but I never got round to doing it. Come out to France and I was using it, so my dad never really used his off-road, so I swapped the wheels over because I had road wheels and tyres. He had the off-road rims and mud terrain tyres, so we put them on my one, and I just used to beat mine up off-roading and stuff. We was using it for pulling out tree stumps because Dad had a tractor, but it just didn't have the weight and the oomph. It would just sort of bounce about on the tow rope. So we put a wire strop on the Range Rover, and we used to yank tree stumps out with it. And we was doing that up until the time that the front diff exploded, which put pay to it really, and I put it up for sale and a French chap come and bought it. So then we get on to, I think I moved in with Tina, went out and bought a transit van. Mark 5 was it? It was a 1998 smiley face transit, banana engine in it, 2.5, non-turbo. That was brilliant. 50 miles to the gallon, easy. It was like a TARDIS inside. It's the same as the one in the picture. Yeah, we had that for quite a while. And then my work sort of, because when I set up work over in France, I was multi-services, which was anything, decorating and maintenance and all that kind of thing. But I was sort of really getting more into the gardening side because I'd rather be outside. I don't want to be in someone's house stripping wallpaper. So we was getting into the gardening. That let the Transit down because you couldn't drive off-road with the Transit. You put one wheel on the grass and that was it. It was stuck. So we bought the Range Rover. Yeah, P38 Range Rover. 2.5 diesel. yeah, that was good. Put some off-road tyres on it and it was going quite well for a long time. We sold the Transit, so we got the Range Rover. At the time, we was using the newer Scenic, which was Tina's mum's, and then that one bit the dust. We bought another Scenic, but it was the RX-4, the four-wheel drive version. So the only reason I'm mentioning that is because the day that the Range Rover broke down, I was out at work. I had the chipper on the back. I was coming back and it kept overheating and whatever. I was getting out, topping it back up with water and that, and it kept cooking up, and then it just got hot and cut out, wouldn't start. So I had to get recovered, but they wouldn't bring me home. They would only take it back to a garage and then get me a taxi back home. So I thought, right, we got it to the garage and I got Tina to come pick me up, and she had a little bit of a whoopsie on the way there and just crashed that Scenic. So we was left with no cars whatsoever. Which wasn't good because we didn't have a lot of money at the time either. So I got in touch with a bloke that I bought the Range Rover off because over here he's a Garage East, which is like a one-man band. He's got a little workshop in his garden and he's registered and he was buying and selling cars. I said, have you got anything in there cheap that we can get back on the road with? He said, oh, I've got this, and it was a Ford Galaxy. Was that a Ford Galaxy? That red thing, or was it the Volkswagen?
No, it was a Ford.
No, it was a Ford. Yeah, Ford Galaxy. Not the rounded one, but the newer shape than that. Anyway, what gets there? It was only like 400 euros. It was sat there running. He said, I'll take it for a drive, see what you think. I drove it up the road and brought it back, and it was all right. It was a bit ropey, and it hadn't really been looked after, but we was desperate, you know. Range Rover's in the garage, stuck. The other car's been towed away, totaled. So I bought it, drove it home. That night we went to go out and it wouldn't change gear. It was automatic, diesel, automatic. It wouldn't change out of first gear. Oh, what the bloody hell is it? Drove home fine. Anyway, it was only going just around the corner. We was having a meal at a friend's house. Anyway, got it back home. The next day I went to drive it again and it wouldn't change gear. Once it got up to temperature, it was fine. So I thought, that crafty sod, he had that car running because he knew that it had a fault. So I phoned him up and gave him a load of shit, and he said, I'll bring it back. He said, I'll give you your money back, because I think he must have known that there was a fault with the car, and if I'd have taken it further, he'd have been in the shit. Oh no, I'll give you your money back, I'll give you your money back. And he weighed it in, scrapped it. So we were still desperate for a car. I don't know how I heard of it, but there was another bloke who was a so-called mechanic. I don't think he was qualified in the job, but because a lot of people that I know that took cars to him never took them back. Put it that way. He had a Ford Scorpio, 300 euros. They put a battery on it, and it was a 2.3 4-cylinder automatic. It looks as ugly as arse. It was an awful looking car, but it was quite smooth to drive. So we had that for about a week, and I was going off to band practice one day, and a big puff of smoke out from under the bonnet, and temperature went right up. Oh, here we go again. Opens the bonnet, and what had happened on the 2.3 engines that the Ford put in, it's got a plastic inlet manifold, and right at the end of the inlet manifold is the thermostat housing. Well, that had exploded, and all the water come out, basically, overheated. So I phoned the chap up that I bought it from. I said, you need to come pick this car up, because yeah, I knew he had a car trailer. He come and picked it up, and we was due to go to England the next week. And so I told him that. I said, it needs fixing, because, you know, we're off on holiday in it. And he was fobbing us off. He tried fixing it with Araldite and stuff. I said, it's not going to fix because it's under pressure. He said, well, it's a new manifold, 600 euros. We'll get one from a scrapyard. So, in the meantime, Mum and Dad lent us their car. We came on holiday. We came back. The car still hadn't been fixed. And right, we want our money back. They'd only give us the 200 back because they said, oh, well, they've put a new battery on it. Anyway, that was that. So we're still without a car. So the chap that we got the Range Rover and the Galaxy from, I phoned him up and says, look, we're desperate. Have you got anything? And he says, well, I've got my old car. It's a little bit tatty, but he said it was fine when I was using it. So anyway, I goes over and has a look. It's a Volvo V70, 2.5 diesel, 5-cylinder. It was in the long grass. Gets it started up, pulls it out, went for driving it. It drove smooth enough. That had some issues. It had a big old dent in one side. And it would start, and you'd go up the road. If you're just touching the throttle a little bit, it was fine. But you'd back off and then put your foot down, and it was just black out the back. It was like someone had turned the lights out. Anyway, we had that for quite a while. Tina had put a stone through the window with a strimmer. So that was taped up with bin bags until we sold it. In the meantime, from the transit van to the Renault Scenics, Tina's mum had died. But we was a long time getting the estate and everything sorted out. But by this time, Tina had inherited a little bit of money. So we bought this Renault Mascot, 3 litre. Superb. For me anyway, because it was nice and comfy in the driver's seat, because it was on springs. We sold the Volvo. A bloke come and give us 200. Well, I put it up for 300 euros, and when he come and had a look, and he was like over the moon with it, I said, to tell you what, have it for 200, because I knew it was a turd basically. But you know, I told him all the faults it had, and I even gave him a tin of Easy Start to go with it. But yeah, the Renault Mascot, fantastic. It was for work basically, but we used to use it for everything because that's all we had. We had it remapped up to 140 horsepower and a lot more torque, because we came back to the UK and bought the trailer and the mower that you've seen in that picture, and coming back, lorries were overtaking us. It was a 3.5 ton trailer, and with that all on the back, it did slow the old truck down a little bit. So we had it remapped, and it was totally different and a hell of a lot better on fuel as well. Then I ended up in hospital. Comes out of hospital. So while I'm in hospital, Tina needed a car because she didn't want to drive the truck. It's too big. So she bought a Ford Mondeo, which was still going when we sold it. And the only reason we sold it was a cock-up with paperwork. I can't remember the story, but Tina sent some stuff off to get the new carte grise, which is your logbook in France. It never got sent back, so something got lost somewhere. You can't take your car for a MOT without the logbook. You provide the logbook when you take it for an MOT, give it to them. But because we didn't have it, it was lost somewhere. You know, it's all been sent off. Now it's all done online, so it's a little bit different, but you could send it in the post before. So it was all a bit of a cock-up. So that car was sort of unusable. I've sort of recovering a little bit, obviously still in a wheelchair, but I quite fancied a nice car. So I found the Audi. So we bought the Audi, we was running around in that. Tina didn't like it at all. So I said, well, we was out and about, and I was looking online, because she's quite particular with her cars. They can't be too rounded, they've got to be square, boxy, and hence the Panda. But having said that, the Mondeo was quite rounded, but it was old. It was 1999, something like that. Anyway, I was trawling on the thing, and I found a Vauxhall Vectra estate. I showed it to her, and she got quite excited. It was in the garage just up the road, so we went and had a quick look at it. She fell in love with it, and we bought it, and then sold the Mondeo. The bloke wanted it. His neighbour had a Mondeo, and the engine or gearbox had gone, so he was taking it and scrapping it. So he bought that, took it away. And I think Tina only lost 50 quid on the Mondeo. I think she paid 400 for it, and we sold it for 350, so that was quite a result. Anyway, had the Vectra. I had the Audi. Then the Vectra broke down. So that was stuck at mum and dad's, and so we had the Audi, and then we bought this place, and Tina said about getting another 4x4. for driving around the field and stuff, because the Audi, although it's 4-wheel drive, it's quite low to the floor, it's quite sporty suspension and that. So okay, if that's all right. So I'm looking online, and that's when we bought the TD6. Took a chance. I bought it in the UK, sight unseen. The bloke delivered it to my sister's house. I taxed and insured it and everything. I said to her, run around in it for a week before you drive it over it, and if anything comes up, we can get it into a garage quick and get it fixed. Well, the only thing that went wrong was the battery kept going flat. So the day before she brought it over, she got it in, they tested the battery. They said it's only 50% serviceable, so they put a new battery on it. She drove it over here, and then we had the TD6, which we've still got sat outside. That's been fantastic. We moved house with that, and it's just been really good. Although the gearbox did start having issues, the gearbox hasn't let the car down. It's other faults that have made it sit out there parked up, as in the intercooler hose. But anyway, so that was that, and so we've got that. And then Tina had always said, once we sold the other house, we'll have a nice car and get a nice Range Rover. So we sold the other house, and I kept looking and looking and looking. I thought, well, I want a TDV8, and there was the 3.6 or the 4.4. And I was going backwards and forwards. There was two that I was choosing. There was a silver 4.4 and the 3.6 that we ended up with. The 3.6 had less miles, and the 4x4, the 4.4 had a tow bar. I thought, well, that might have had a heavy, hard life towing stuff about. The 3.6 hasn't had a tow bar, right? Anyway, the 4.4 was about £6 more expensive. So, and watching reviews and stuff, I settled on the 3.6, and that's the one we've got now. Thoroughly chuffed to bits with it. The Hobbit has now got a dream car, which is the Fiat Panda. And that's where we are today with all our vehicles. Outside we've got the TD6, the TDV8, the Fiat Panda and the Audi. Gonna hopefully fix the Audi, get that sold, get the TD6 fixed and get that sold, and then we'll just be left with the TDV8 and the Panda, and that'll be it. Hopefully we'll keep the TDV8 going for as long as possible, for many years to come, and the Panda of course, because that's quite easy to fix really. And that's it. That's my history of cars. How they've come about and how they've gone. What has been reliable and what hasn't. All cars have got their faults, but some more than others. And it's like with the Range Rovers, everyone's saying, oh, Land Rover, big pile of shit going, they're so unreliable, they're this and that. If you go onto a forum on the internet and you type in a certain fault, you're going to get 10 to 20 people moaning and bitching about this one particular fault. If you take that out of all the thousands of cars they've sold, it's quite a low percentage. And that's the same with any maker car. So, yeah, that's it. That's my history with cars. So I hope you liked this video. Please give it a big thumbs up if you did, and you've managed to get right to the end. Subscribe if you haven't already. And from me and the Hobbit in the other room, it's bye for now.